Hello, my name is Kieran Larwood. I write a series of books called The Five Realms, which are a children's fantasy book for 8 years and up, set in a fantasy world inspired by my love of books like The Hobbit and The Box of Delights. And it's in a world where just rabbits live. And so far there are 4 books in the series. The first one is The Legend of Podkin One-Ear, which won the Blue Peter Best Story Award. They all have amazing covers by an artist called Fernando Juarez, and they're all illustrated inside by an incredible illustrator called David Wyatt, who does lovely black and white spreads throughout all the books. The first one tells the story of our hero Podkin and his sister Paz and little brother Pook when they set off on their adventures. There's evil creatures called the Gorm, who are rabbits, have been taken over by living iron, and they are trying to control the whole rabbit world. The second one in this series is called The Gift of Dark Hollow, which carries on Podkin's story. The third is The Beasts of Grimheart, which brings this first part of Podkin's story to a close with an enormous battle. And then book number 4, which came out last year, is called Uki and the Outcasts. It's part of the same story, it's set in the same world, but it has a different group of characters. The hero in this one is a rabbit called Uki. He's a chimera, which means half his fur on one side is one colour and half on the other is a different colour. He's a friend called Jory, who comes from a clan of assassin rabbits, but she doesn't want to be an assassin anymore. And a rabbit called Cree, who is from the plains, and she rides a jerboa called Mooka. And they all set off together, and they have a different quest to Podkin. There are some evil spirits that have escaped from their prison. There's 4 of them, and Uki and his friends have to capture them in these crystal shards that Uki carries, and he can absorb their powers when he's caught them. So this first book talks about the first 2 spirits, and then the new book is Uki and the Swamp Spirit, which is out on the 7th of January. And in this story, Uki and his friends, they travel to the Fenlands, which is a kind of marshy, swampy area, and there is another one of the spirits he's trying to capture living there called Charis. She is the spirit of disease and plague. I wrote this in January 2019, before I'd even heard of the coronavirus and the pandemic, but it does deal with an evil spirit who wants to take over the world by infecting it all with disease, and Uki has to try and stop her. When I write a book, I think it's really good to get a feel of the scenery and the setting, so I like to go to the kind of place it's been set and put lots of that information into the book. It's a really good idea when you're trying to write description, is try and experience it yourself first before you write it. I'm going to read you a bit now from the story. I'm going to read you a part when Uki and his friends, they've gone into the swamp, and there's 2 kind of tribes that live there, the Girdles and the Maggots. And Uki has met a rabbit. He's an old blacksmith called Cole. He's been injured in an accident, so he has one leg and a kind of hammer instead of an arm. And he's led them into the marshes to the Girdles camp, and they're having a party there, but something's about to go horribly wrong. "Sounds like trouble," said Cole, standing up with the help of his crutch. Uki leapt up too, but was hit by such a powerful throbbing in his head he nearly collapsed again. "Charis," he managed to gasp. "It's her! She's here!" Caught up with all his worries, he hadn't felt the creeping rise of sickness, not until it was too late, not until she was practically on top of him. But there was no mistaking it. His every sense was blaring out her presence. She was in the Girdle village somewhere, only metres away. He reached behind his head, grabbing a spear from his harness. Even as he began to focus, to try and pinpoint the spirit in all the noise around him, there was a loud whooshing sound from the bonfire in the platform centre. Some substance had been thrown into the flames, making a mushroom cloud of smoke billow out. Green and stinking, the fumes rushed over the whole village in an instant, making every rabbit stagger and cough. "Uki, where are you?" a voice called out nearby, and suddenly Jory was there, wrapping her arms about him in a tight hug. "Thank Kether, I couldn't find you. I got stuck talking to that stupid boy. Then there was screams and smoke." "It's Charis," Uki shouted. "She's here, in the village." "Whiskers!" Jory drew her sword and stared about her, trying to squint through the smoke. "Where's Cree? Where's Mooka?" Clutching arms, they moved forwards. Cole close behind them. Forms surged from the smoke, making them jump, but they were always just Girdle rabbits, fleeing from the attack, trying to get somewhere safe. It was only when they reached the other side of the fire that they saw the figures. As the stinking green fumes began to ebb, they could make out a group of rabbits standing at the platform edge. Cloaked and hunched, Their silhouettes seemed wrong somehow, bulging and unbalanced, unlike any rabbits Uki had seen before. There were 5 or more, all draped in hooded cloaks of shiny leather, squares of scaled skin patterned with black zigzags. The capes hung low over their bodies and faces, almost hiding the tortured forms beneath. Almost. As Uki stared, the tendrils of smoke parted and the invaders came into focus. Plague, rot, virus, these rabbits had been ravaged by all 3. Uki could see scraps of sandy fur and the long splayed toes of the other fen natives, but they were the only traces of the creatures these things had once been. Charis's touch had been cruel. Now their eyes were swollen, sealed shut with crusted pus. Mucus dripped from their nostrils, dribbled from their open mouths. Every scrap of flesh was blistered and raw, covered in layers of boils and sores that hung in bunches, hiding their paws or burying their necks in ripples of bulging tissue. Bok, what is wrong with those rabbits? Cree had found them, dragging a coughing Mooka behind her. But Uki didn't have time to welcome her. He was too busy staring at the figure in the middle of the huddle. The thing that Cole had said was Granny, the leader of the Magich clan. Just like when he had come face to face with Volcus in the body of Mayor Renard, Uki was seeing 2 things at once. One was the solid poisoned body of an old she-rabbit. The other was the ghostly image of Charis, spirit of plague and disease. The senses he had absorbed from Ifrit let him see her true form when no one else could. A tall, thin, earless creature with thin strands of hair straggling from her head. More corpse than anything, her leathery skin was pocked and scarred with the ravages of countless diseases. Her yellowed eyes were blind and blank, yet glowing with cruel power at the same time. Quick, Uki! Jory squeezed his arm, her jaw clenched as she fought back the wave of nausea that swept over her. Your spear! Uki shook his head clear of the visions and raised the spear, ready to throw it into Charis's heart and trap her forever in its crystal head. He wound back his arm just as the possessed body of Granny Magich opened its mouth and bellowed. Girdles, I bring a gift to end our petty squabbles once and for all. I bring you the perfect plague. I bring you delectable disease. Before Uki could release the spear, there came a roaring, hissing sound. Loud enough to make him wince, it built up from somewhere in the swamp behind and then rushed towards them, shaking the matted wood of the platform, making the lanterns dance on the ropes above them. And then, like a tsunami wave crashing onto a beach, a solid black cloud of buzzing, chittering insects blew out of the trees, engulfing the Girdle village, smashing towards Uki and his friends as fast as a thunderclap. Okay, so I would like to set you a writing activity, something for you to do yourselves. And what I had to do for this book is to kind of build up the real feeling of the swamps being a different place, almost like a different country. I had to create my own language of words, a kind of dialect that the swamp characters used. It's in a glossary at the back of the book there. For example, I had, instead of bottom, I had bollycracker. Instead of flipping, I had glommeting. And walking through mud or marsh, I had glop-stalking. So I took some words, everyday words that the rabbits might use, and I made up some of my own that sounded kind of like they fit the environment, the place they lived in. So I'd like you to do that. Think of some everyday words, think of some new names or new words you could use instead, and then use that to write a scene or maybe a piece of dialogue between some of your characters there, putting the dialogue in, putting the new words that you've invented into the dialogue. It helps create a real sense of place, a real sense of a different part of the world that you've made up. So I hope you enjoyed hearing about my new book. I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit of the story. Uki and the Swamp Spirit, it's out from Faber, illustrated by David Wyatt on the 7th of January 2021. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.